Hey guys, welcome back to the 429 podcast. I'm 2,
I'm four.
I'm nine.
and today's topic is going to be the right to repair. So let's start off 9. Why don't you give us a definition of what is the right to repair?
So the right to repair is basically allowing consumers the ability to repair and basically modify their own like electronic devices, whereas you would need like a manufacturer's own service to do so.
Okay. Now,
So,
why do you feel it's important that we should have right to repair or we shouldn't have right to repair?
Well, I mean, I think with the current pandemic conditions, right, it might not be feasible to rely on a manufacturer's services, to repair such devices or to allow services for these devices. Sometimes uh, you should be able to, if you know how to fix it, or even hire a third party service repair shop to fix it quickly. They should have the means of the not only the parts but also the information and documentation needed to fix it. Um, and furthermore, as someone who's just really tech savvy and like really likes tinkering with products and stuff like that, it just feels iffy that every time I want to like tinker with my own products that I purchase, I can't even like I'm worried about like warranty or voiding some sort of contract with them because there's so much red tape with all the repair, especially in New York.
mhm.
Interesting. 4, what's your thoughts?
So, I mean, obviously, the right to repair is really important. Um, without the right to repair, you can have many different companies having, almost total monopolies over the repairing on their products. Um, I mean, and that's obviously not good, right? No one company should be the only people able to fix a set of products, right? I mean, let's look at a variety of companies, right? Let's start with like tech companies, for example. You've got people like Microsoft and Apple who have their hardware and products, and luckily some of these companies like Apple, for example, they've been kind of increasing their third party repair activities and programs, which is really great. But if they weren't doing that, they'd be the only people capable of fixing Apple products. And with the amount of Apple products in the world, I mean, if they were the only ones able to fix it, they'd be able to charge whatever they wanted. A lot of people rely on their products, and it would be not a really good situation for the consumers that purchase those products. Like I said, luckily, I know we've actually seen recently Apple is kind of increasing their third-party repair programs to Canada and Mexico. Right, Nine? I think you were telling me about that the other day.
Yeah, yeah. So like recently, Apple have been pushing, especially I think they're also worried with the whole pandemic conditions that they can't really provide the necessary services to as normally to manufacture, and they want to extend the ability to of their authorized service repair third parties to basically Mexico and Canada now. So that means that it's still through a channel support of Apple, but authorized third party repair shops can now basically get the necessary documentation and
Mm-hmm.
parts and purchase them from Apple directly, which allows these third party shops to basically allow you to service and work on your devices. So that means you're not only relying on Apple's own line of support to fix your iPhone or whatever.
This is a
I
really
guess
kind of big area as well, right? Because right to repair, being from the United States, we're pretty lucky where, I mean, we have some legislators that will fight for us on certain things, and there have been some legislation proposed to kind of ensure that for certain industries we have right to repair, um, and that's really great. But not all countries have those same, how do I put it, benefits. They don't have those same guarantees that we have, and I mean, it's not even the fact that we have those guarantees that's great, but in other countries they might not even be able to use the manufacturers like authorized repairing, right? For let's take some countries like I don't know, maybe India or China or countries where maybe these companies don't have as big of a presence, right? If they don't have the right to repair their products, they don't have the proper um, pieces and components they need, they don't have the proper documentation and tools, and they also can't use authorized repair centers or send stuff directly to Apple or whoever we're talking about's repair center. How are they supposed to fix their products? Right? So I think right to repair could be an even larger problem when it comes to international usage of products.
Yeah, I agree.
to counter those points, right? I think I agree with you on that sense from an international standpoint. It's definitely tough for countries that don't have the support of these US based companies such as Microsoft, Apple, you know, that it would be hard for them to get proper repairs done and everything. But, on the flip side for right to repair, I think right to repair should be a thing, but I think within reason. So, and the reason I say this is because you don't want to give up I guess you want to say the competitiveness of these firms, right? So it's like Apple makes its money off of their hardware. As much as it may be on their software can only run because of the custom hardware that Apple provides.
Yeah.
So when you start allowing people to actually tinker with their hardware and everything, it's sort of a drawback because you can have, competitors like we've seen in China, reverse engineer Apple products and come up with maybe a better version or even a competitive version. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, right? But it can also open gateways for other malicious activities to happen between these companies. So I guess it really comes down to, would you rather trust, Apple, or would you rather trust a Chinese company building a product that's very similar to an Apple product, right?
Well,
I mean, yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point. I would say another thing also on top of that, to be, devil's advocate, would be the idea, this is their brand, right? At the end of the day.
Exactly.
Like, sure, I mean, you buy the product, it's your product, right? But anything you tinker with them, you're still using, Apple's, trademark copyrights, their technology, right? And if you're given the ability to just tinker away and modify in any way you see fit, and then, heaven forbid, there's like an issue or an error, right? Now it becomes very difficult for Apple to, repair it if a problem does arise, because you don't know what exactly you tinkered. You worked outside of their scope of what a user should be allowed to do, right? And and it puts them in a bad spot because now the user be like, well, we can't fix my product. Well, that's bad service,
And that essentially just damages their brand. That's the biggest issue, because you don't want to undermine your brand. Your brand is your ultimate asset, right?
Exactly.
So when you see these fake iPhones going around, or these fake iPods or fake AirPods or whatever they are, right? It undermines Apple's brand, for example. But that's only an example from like Apple's side. You can take this example and put it in multiple different industries, like we've seen with fake Xbox games that have come out that undermine the software of Xbox, right?
Yeah, or PlayStation too, even to that extent. There's some fake PlayStations I actually saw that actually really, I wouldn't say convincing because they run terribly, but just the actual product design of like the box shape and everything, it's pretty much identical to a PlayStation. But internally, the electronics are completely different. They're shelled, they're, just really old, crappy parts that they just got from somewhere. But the fact that if you were to take a PlayStation, be able to modify it or, get full documentation how it works, then the market would just be flooded with these like cheap knockoffs.
And that really kills Sony's brand, and right, and like we already spoke in an earlier podcast. If you guys haven't heard about the future of gaming, right, where we already discussed, where we see console gaming heading, and where we see PC gaming heading, and everything, right?
Yeah, check it out, by the way.
If it undermines Sony's brand, right, or Microsoft's brand, take Xbox for example, right, then it really just hampers the quality of the software we're going to be getting at the end of the day, because I'm in some sense okay with not having the right to repair. For example, an iPhone, I'm perfectly okay with not having the right to repair on that type of product, because it really gives Apple the full control, I would say, to give us the best possible features.
Yeah.
Right? And you can argue, yeah, I may have bought a product and at the end of the day, Apple has full control of it. You can say that, but I'm technically leveraging their service. I could have easily chosen to go with a competitor of theirs, maybe a Samsung phone, maybe another type of Android phone, where I could tinker with it, play with it, and use it, right? But I purposely chose to go with this because of the software and the services that they provide. So that was, again, a consumer decision. That wasn't necessarily a decision on right to repair.
Yeah, I don't think I should, speaking on that, that's pretty much one of Apple's main appeals, right? Their control of their hardware, on their software, right? And their tight control to allow such seamless experience from the user, right? That's what makes them. I think that's what gives it what people call the Apple Edge over Android and Samsung, right? That everything you see from the way the phone is designed, from the hardware specs to the software, works so integrated with every single, not just with that product, but with every single Apple product, because it's designed with every single element designed. And they wouldn't get such close knit integration unless they had full control of everything. You
And
know?
you could say the same thing for Google with their Google Pixel line,
Yeah,
right?
but that's another thing I want to mention actually. Compared to Google and Samsung, right? Um, a lot of people have been praising Apple recently, and I agree with the praise that they've been really pushing privacy, right, to the forefront of what they want to achieve, right? The new iOS 14 update has been showing, even in the beta phase, have been showing a lot of what a lot of apps are maliciously copying from your clipboard and stuff like that, and it's showing how much power they have to our data, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's only because that Apple has so much control of its software and its hardware that it can narrow down pretty much privacy focused features for the users, right? Compared to like Google, who basically makes Android the software, but has to essentially, what's it called, license out to many other manufacturers for their phones, and right? They can't make a fully integrated software with every single phone that uses Android because there's so many phones. I think there's like 1,000 every year made that uses the Android license, right? So because you have such disconnect from the software and the hardware, Google has constantly always been criticized that there's like, it's like Google Play App Store is filled with like malicious apps, right? And like trash what's it called, like data gathering apps. And that's because they can't have that tight integration with their hardware and their software. While Apple, because they're so focused on control and monetizing every single element of the process, that's why they have such much more cleaner app store environment compared to Google.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do want to talk about one thing, right? So I know we're talking about a lot about like branding and how, having third-party people service it, or having me myself service my own products could possibly make a company look bad or kind of ruin their reputation, I guess, right? I think we would really need to see a kind of culture shift, right? So, I mean, people would just need to understand that, okay, let's say my phone breaks, I'm going to get it repaired by a third-party repair guy, right? Because it's, maybe half the price of what the actual company that owns the phone is going to charge. I just need to, as a consumer, understand that I'm paying less because I'm not getting it serviced by the people who can service it the best, right? In my opinion, it's a kind of culture shift that needs to happen surrounding how we perceive kind of repairing and how we perceive companies as a whole, right? So just because my phone, let's say my screen breaks and maybe I get it repaired by a third party and there's a bubble under my new screen, an air pocket, right? That's not Apple's fault. That's my third party provider's fault, right? I shouldn't now think of this and say, oh my gosh, Apple is such a bad company, my new screen has a bubble under it. That's my third party provider's fault for doing a shoddy job at installing the screen, right? So I think that's kind of just an understanding that would need to happen if we really want to have full right to repair and not have it impact how people perceive different companies.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree with you there. So you would definitely need a cultural mindset shift into the whole right to repair stuff. That, yes, it's not Apple's fault or Microsoft's fault or Google's fault, right? It would be the fault of whoever that third-party repairer is. But then when you go from that third-party repairer and then you go take it to Apple, and then Apple tells you that, oh, hey, we can't fix this, or Google tells you that, hey, we can't fix this, right? They're doing what's justifiably right because that's what's in the terms and service, right?
Yep.
You sign most people don't know this, but when you buy a product from Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, whatever it may be, if it's a hardware product, it comes with the terms of service agreement, right? And Apple's terms of service agreement, it clearly states that if you choose to modify their hardware, or if you choose to jailbreak your phone, for example, for those of you who don't know, jailbreaking is modifying the software on your phone to install apps outside of the App Store, for example, and create your own custom sort of like layouts and stuff. But if you choose to go outside of Apple's ecosystem, right? Apple clearly states that it's not responsible. And so I find that okay. And to your point on right to repair industry, right? We have a whole industry dedicated to, tinkerers and everything like that. So you can take the example of a Raspberry Pi, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or an Arduino system. So you have that tinkering, industry where it's all on you at the end of the day. Like, you go buy the Raspberry Pi for $100, $200, depending on the brand you're getting, right? And you go build whatever you want with it. You want to build a crazy server, you want to build a helicopter, go for it, right? You have your Raspberry Pi, go with it. And so I guess there needs to be a semblance of balance between, right to repair and the hardware that you're buying from a company, whether it's a Pixel from Google or an iPhone from Apple, or even a gaming system. Like, take the Switch, for example, right? Like, you really want to be able to modify, like, the Nintendo Switch, or, like, back then, like, the Nintendo Wii or something. Like, that would have put Nintendo at such a huge disadvantage compared to Apple and Sony, right?
Well, I think we need to kind of make a distinction here, right? So I think there's a big difference between right to repair and right to tinker, right? Right to repair, at least to me, that means that I have the capability to fix my own products, or someone else can fix it for me that's not the manufacturer of that product, right? Right to tinker, I mean, I think realistically you always have that right. I mean, like, like, for example, I can bust open my iPhone and start doing what I want to it, but I mean, the only thing that need to be understood is that Apple is then not responsible for what happens to my phone. And I mean, I think that's perfectly reasonable.
Yes.
If I start messing around with the inside of my phone, there's no reason why Apple should be responsible to fix my mistakes, when if I just followed their guidelines, I would have had no problems.
I think what's going on is a lot of people get what they perceive as the right to tinker or the right to repair. They perceive that they can tinker all they want, but without the consequences of that.
Yeah.
I would say, as someone who tinkers a lot, right? I tinker a lot of my own products, right? And I still try to follow within the guidelines. And I know purposely well when like, for example, gaming consoles are a really good example, right? I tinkered with my Switch, right? I modify it, not like heavily, but like, cosmetically, right? And I knew that would, one, void the warranty, right? And I knew, two, that if anything happens to it, that's my consequences, right? Like, if I broke it, if I, misline a ribbon here, or they didn't fix a button alignment there, that thing will be broken. And, the Joy-Cons of the Switch are one of the most, I've been heard, are one of the most toughest repairs you can do, because there's so many complicated technology and it's such a small package, right? And I done it. But throughout the whole thing, I was thinking, if I even misalign one ribbon, that's it. There's no way, and I have no right, and I have no foundation to stand on to be like, well, it's not working on Nintendo, fix it, because they don't have to. And
exactly.
I know.
So you basically forego your right to repair when you decide to open that hardware and go with it, which is fine. If you know what you're doing, you know how to fix it, you know how to go with it. You obviously have the right to repair it yourself, right?
Yeah.
But like, you forego your right to repair by the manufacturer, right? Which is, I think, completely fair in the grand scheme of things, because you chose to do something that was out of their agreement when you decided to purchase it.
Yep.
I think what comes down to it is a lot of people have issues that for people who do have the technical skill and the knowledge to do such repairs, right? That's a thing that's mostly what irritates them, that they don't have the access to purchase the parts they need, or the documentation that they need to fully understand what they're doing. Yep. I think that's what really comes down to. I don't think the whole right to repair really stands on for, like, John Doe, who's trying to, who's the first time ever, he never soldered anything in his life, and he wants to modify his Switch, and he breaks it, and he's like, my it's Nintendo, why won't he fix it? That's so mean. But it's more to like a technician who knows, circuitry, embedded systems, and stuff like that, and he has a Joy-Con drift, a problem that's been pegging a lot of Joy-Cons, and actually, unfortunately, having legal trouble with Nintendo right now, and he just wants to fix it. He knows what the problem is, he knows what the part is, but he just can't get an actual, and he wants to get the part from an authorized seller. Like, he's willing to pay extra to get it from an authorized seller like Nintendo, but there's no means to do it. He has to go through a Chinese third party like AliExpress, and he doesn't like that idea. I think that's what it comes down to: lack of accessibility and a lack of working with these companies for people who do have the technical abilities to do so.
But I want to
let's
make
think about something here, right? Let's
Go
think
for
about
it.
these limitations, right? So let's come up with a hypothetical situation, right? Let's say, for example,
Yeah.
Apple comes up with this new way to install processors, and it requires this really special machine to do it. But by installing the processor like this, maybe they can make their laptops that much thinner, right? Just for example. Now, Apple goes and gets a patent on this machine that they're now installing their processors with, right?
Yeah.
If right to repair is legally required by Apple, but they have a patent on their machine and they don't want to sell that machine, how could that ever be enforced fully? Because now you technically don't have the right to replace your own processor anymore, because you need this special machine that Apple made and has a patent on, right? So this is, I kind of think that there are a lot of edge cases that also need to be handled in terms of like legalities like that.
Yeah, but like for example, in that one that you just mentioned, right? That's Apple's trade secret, right? And they have the right to come up with that trade secret. The technique, of course, I'm not a lawyer, so anyone listening, please take all this with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm.
Apple has the right to come up with their own unique techniques and approaches to actually install hardware on their machines. Now, you choose to actually open up the machine and install your own processor or your own RAM or whatever. Again, you're foregoing that right to repair, is what I'm saying.
No. I think you misunderstood me, right? So what I'm saying is it's your right to repair your broken processor, right? That's what you're saying. You have the right to repair your own stuff. But now Apple is using a special how do I put it? Like special machine to install some of their components that they then have a patent on that machine, right? So now you don't have access to that machine. They have a patent on it, so you physically can't make it. You can't buy it. Maybe there could be, but the odds of there being a third-party machine like that they don't, kind of claim is infringing on their patent would probably be low, right? I feel like I said, there kind of needs to be, I think, a balance, right? This is almost like an edge case where now their patent, which they have legally and they're allowed to have, right? And they're not forced to give people rights to it. They're not forced to license it. They're not forced to make more of them, right? Now, even if right to repair is required by legislation, which in most places it's not right now, now they have a patent that backs this up, and now those two pieces of legal paperwork conflict with each other. So how do you solve that problem? I think this is another big problem.
Well, then again, I guess you can just say at the consumer level, right? If you go into Apple and you want to go do that repair, right? Like you give Apple your laptop, Mac, whatever it is, to actually go and fix the processor, right? But again, if they're charging you like $10,000 to fix that processor, right? Something's flawed here, right? Yeah. We all understand that.
I think Apple's current approach is actually kind of handles that pretty well. I think that they realize this issue, which is pretty much having a very close selection of authorized repair shops in their program.
Exactly.
Right? There's a process in which they basically audit this repair shop, basically, right? They do the legal processing. They ensure that it's a legit repair shop, that they have good customer feedback, and essentially that they will represent them as a company well in their services, right? Mm-hmm. And if they do pass this process and they do enter the program, one, there's always a direct connection to them and Apple, right? Which means that if they need a special machine to do it, they can purchase it, right? And two, that means Apple also has a direct connection to them, so that they can, if they see that they're handling customers badly or they're doing repairs badly and stuff like that, Apple can have the the legal process to be like, no, you're no longer in the program, you're out, right?
Mm-hmm. But the fourth point with that special machine that Apple has, right? Obviously, if Apple is charging outrageous fees, like say if they didn't have third-party people to come and fix your Apple appliances, tech, well, Apple tech, whatever. You still, at the end of the day, lost my train of thought. But you still, at the end of the day, can go to Apple and have it fixed. Now, again, if Apple is charging you $5-10 to just fix it, and we've seen instances of other companies, right, that they charge more to actually fix it than getting a new version or a new product for theirs. Now, that's where I guess the whole competitive aspect comes in, because someone can go and make a better product, right? Or maybe not a better product, but a product that's more affordable to consumers, right? That undermines Apple's market.
Mm-hmm.
And so you as a business owner, business operator, and like how Apple, for example, as the business operator, would realize that, hey, we can't charge $5,000 for a repair, even though we can. Apple can easily charge $5,000 for a repair if they wanted to, for a screen, for example, right?
Yeah.
But they're smart. It's smart business sense to not charge that much and to only charge as bare minimum or as necessary as possible with their margins, right?
As much as the market will bear.
Exactly.
Just so they stay competitive, and you don't see, Microsoft come out with a phone tomorrow that completely undermines Apple's whole ecosystem.
I think also you should take account the amount of tech and knowledge that needs to do some of these repairs, right? Where like we were talking about like levels of difficulty that's beyond. It could be even a simple repair technician can do, right? If let's take the example further, that special machine housing, right? It's probably working on like nano levels of technology, right? You're talking about like nanomilliliters of like circuitry that you have to house in order to get the processing to hook up to the board and get it to compile. So that's why it's so thin, and to get it run and to spec. That's something like no one's gonna have the skill or the machine equipment to do unless you're specially trained, especially by Apple. If this is like their own proprietary technology. So like a cost that high could be justifiable if the technology and the job needed to do so is that difficult, right? This is not just me changing the housing on my Switch, right? This is like new levels of difficulty.
Like you're definitely aware of Moore's law. How transistors are getting smaller and smaller every 2 years and stuff like that. So Apple's able to do incredible things. Apple's just one example we're going with here, guys. Any tech company or any company in the world can actually go with this.
Deals with this. I mean, like Microsoft is another big one, right? And you can even say that Microsoft's kind of taking maybe either a step backwards or forwards with how they're recently announced that they're closing their stores, right? Some people view that as like, okay, a lot of people view it as like Microsoft has stores. Like a lot of people didn't even know that. But I kind of view it as a kind of like a downgrade, because I saw a lot of stories and I agree with them that like, even if you're a tech company, I think you should always have a presence, and like in the physical realm, because being able to talk to someone who knows the technology, who's been trained by these companies, and in basically knowing that the knowledge I'm getting from them is, legit, and that they've, been trained to basically give us right information and help me organize my thoughts and basically point me in the right point. That's always been really valuable for me. That's why I really like going to the Apple stores. Every time I go there, I feel like I'm essentially I'm always pointing in the right direction. If it's something technical problem or even trying to buy a product, I'm giving an experience where I'm pointing in the right direction and I'm not feel like I'm getting like a sales pitch, And that's why I also really like the Microsoft stores. I'm really sad to see them, completely disappearing now.
I think we should talk a little bit about how the different industries play a role in, I guess, kind of the right to repair that you should have, right? So for example, I know we just talked about processors, right? Processors are very delicate, very unique, and complex pieces of computing equipment, right?
Above my pay grade, yeah.
The right to repair for a processor that needs a certain machine to be made with, and all these other things might be different than your right to repair your gaming PC, right? That uses that as a component.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a couple different, like I would say, like kind of main industries that I would talk about, right? We have electronics, there's automobiles, there's maybe gaming and medical. I mean, all of these different kind of industries are going to have, I guess, different requirements when it comes to repairing those products. So what are your opinions on that, guys?
Well, you have a valid point, right? Like streaming to what I said earlier, the difficulty is just the curve of difficulty is so like exponentially different in different industries, right? And not even that, just the circumstances of them are also exponentially different. Like the circumstances in the gaming industry is far different than the circumstances in the medical industry, right? While one is just, man, I can't play NBA 2K20 today compared to this man might die.
That's a big difference there.
It's a very big difference, right? So like you can't have one legislation as like a blanket solution for all these industries
You know
because it would be so different.
you're so right there. Too. Go ahead. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with you in that sense that I don't think we can have a broad legislation that says, hey, whatever product you buy, you have the right to repair it, right? Because it can, for example, in the tech industry, in the gaming industry, right? It can hamper competitive advantages,
Mm-hmm.
right? But in other industries, such as the medical industry, the farming industry, it can literally be the difference between life and death, right?
Yeah.
In the medical industry, as we've seen with the current pandemic. So, for those of you who don't know, we're recording this in 2020, where we're currently undergoing the coronavirus pandemic. And so, it can physically save someone's life, as we've seen with the ventilators and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And even in the farming industry, right? The farmers, I think, should have a right to repair because they are growing food for the United States. The Midwest is the breadbasket of the United States. So they're growing food for the whole United States to actually feed a population and continue going.
Mm-hmm.
So when you hamper those abilities, you are really talking about the life and death of people. Whereas in gaming and tech, it may not necessarily be life and death, right? But I think you can be more lenient on right to repair if you're getting a better service at the end of the day.
Yep.
Such as we've seen these companies such as Nintendo, Apple, Microsoft, all provide at the end of the day.
Now, I think when we talk about the medical industry, this is kind of a really unique industry when it comes to right to repair. So
yeah, I agree.
Let's think about exactly what it would mean for the medical industry if right to repair was a thing, right? So let's say I'm some executive at a hospital and I decide I want to buy, 1,000 ventilators, right? And if right to repair was just a blanket thing that everybody has the right to repair products, right? And no one can say otherwise. Maybe I could walk in as Joe Schmo off the street, get hired, and go fix ventilators, right? Now, obviously that shouldn't happen, right? I mean, I think in the medical industry, it should be more required for kind of specialized, maybe certified medical technicians that work on medical equipment and have proven their ability to do it, to fix medical equipment that's actually used on real patients, as opposed to just anyone being able to fix this stuff.
Agreed.
Now, I don't know if that's something that would be addressed by specifics in terms of like civil suits that would go on when, let's say that right to repair is just a blanket legislation and some rando guy fixes a ventilator and it didn't fix it properly and some guy dies because of that, right? Is that a civil suit that should happen after that, which would then cause the hospital to say, oh, we have to have certified technicians, and they'd have to be kind of written in as policy and procedure instead of as actual legislation? Personally, I think it would be better as actual legislation because I know policy and procedure doesn't always get followed properly. And, when you're playing with people's lives, it's a little different than just money. So I do think it needs to be looked at a little bit differently.
I think also another thing to point, back to that Joe Smo example, right? These types of documentations of like ventilators and stuff, they shouldn't be so easily accessible, right? Because God forbid someone tries to, use the documentation in some malicious way to sabotage these ventilators, right? Like the damage that can do,
Mm-hmm.
This is not type of, like I said, the circumstances in this industry is so vastly different than in the game and electronic, right? You're playing with people's lives here, so they shouldn't have detailed diagrams or blueprints of ventilators and other medical equipment that are basically keeping people alive,
Yeah,
and I do
actually
believe
think I disagree.
Really?
Yeah. So I think that having those detailed diagrams public is better for everybody, and I really think the odds of someone sabotaging a ventilator is really, really slim as opposed to a medical technician needing that documentation and not being able to find it. I think it should be pretty much accessible to everybody. I think it would be really good for training medical technicians for it to be accessible. I think
I'm not saying
putting a
it
limit
shouldn't
on
be.
it is a bad thing.
I'm not saying it shouldn't be accessible. I'm just saying it should be accessible by the right people. I'm saying like Joe Smo shouldn't be able to basically Google it and get the documentations. I'm saying that if you're basically like you said earlier, like you have to been trained to be a technician, right? And if you've been trained as a technician, you probably work for a company that's registered on let's say a program that allows access. It's kind of the same thing how like in any industry you shouldn't have access to documentations that everyday citizens should have. I'm
Well,
saying
let's think about this, right? So, for
Mhm.
example, in a hospital situation, I definitely think that that's true. Where
We're talking about hospital right now. We're talking about medical right now.
well, there's other medical devices, right? Let's take, for example, you have
A pacemaker.
a pacemaker, or you have a diabetes monitor. I think this is a little bit kind of like easier, right? Let's say your diabetes monitor is having problems,
Okay.
and you want to fix it yourself. Once again, now this is life or death. If you fix it wrong, that's
You're
your
dead.
fault. You might not be able to notice that your blood sugar is dropped, and you might go into a diabetic coma, right? Like, this could happen. But once again, you decided to fix it yourself, so you reap the consequences of trying to fix your own stuff. And I think if you want to fix your own stuff, you should be able to access the documentation to fix that stuff. And I mean, I think there are plenty of people who need medical devices in their day-to-day lives and have them in their own home and use them for only themselves. And I think by limiting that documentation, you stop them from accessing stuff that only they're going to use. In a hospital, I think it's definitely different because now you're in the business of helping people and the business of saving people. But when it comes to personal equipment that you own yourself, I don't think that just because these devices are mostly used in a hospital, that you shouldn't be able to find the documentation you want.
Oh, it's hard to say because once again, that's still a situation of life and death, right? And if someone's willing to mess with their own pacemaker, right, knowing the consequences that they're gonna die, I feel like they should even have that option that they're basically even attempt that. If you're gonna fix your pacemakers only because you have the knowledge and already work in an industry where you have that type of knowledge, so you already should have that documentation. Not someone who's like, I want to fix my pacemaker, or it's a little anked up. Maybe I should go to the hospital. Nah, maybe I'm gonna fix it right now.
But I think this comes back to the point of legislation at the end of the day versus policy that Ford brought up, right? Now, you can pass legislation, at least within the United States. I cannot speak for the rest of the world, but at least within the United States, you can pass legislation that affects certain industries. Like we saw in 2009 after the financial crisis, the legislation put in place on the financial industry. We have seen legislation put in on other industries such as oil, tobacco, and even medical, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think you can specify right to repair per industry, but I guess it would really depend on how far do you want to take that right to repair. Do I think there should be a right to repair on the tech industry? In a limited sense. I think there should be a right to repair on the tech industry in a limited sense, given that the right to repair is not necessarily hampering the service you're going to get, right?
Yeah.
But in the medical industry, I think there should be a full-blown right to repair, right? Just so it can ease costs for everyone involved, right? It may be anti-competitive for the hospital industry, right? But at the end of the day, if they're losing a couple $100 by just having some certified technician who's already on call at the hospital just fix a ventilator when it could be a life or death situation, right? I think that's 100% worth it because you saved a person's life at the end of the day instead of just a couple $100 and maybe a 3-day wait time to have someone actually come in on call. Especially as we've seen throughout this whole pandemic situation, stuff like this is unpredictable, so it can really affect the life or death of a person.
It's hard to say. I mean, right now, I think the problem is like when we said back earlier, there's just a lack of access to these documentations. It's not even that we're even saying right now that certain technicians shouldn't, certain technicians should.
But to Forrest's point, I think that documentation by legislation be required if they release that equipment. So if you release a piece of ventilator equipment into the market, by law, you should release some sort of service documentation that can help, or some licensing courses or something, a training course, right? That will help people understand how the system works and how they can fix it. But
Now,
this is in particular to the medical industry.
Well, what if? Okay, let's get back to the to another edge case, right? Similar to the one we had earlier. What if it's using a part like a trade secret of this company, right? And they don't want their competitors to know, this ventilator has a unique way of, let's say, reducing costs and still providing the same quality other ventilators at a lower cost, right? but it's designed in a way where they can't just release documentation because well, it will give away their secrets.
Well, then at the end of the day, you may not have to release the documentation, but then what you can also do is provide training courses. You can actually get certified by that company itself and get paid for that certified training course, right?
Mm-hmm.
To do it. So the hospital may have to pay $2,000 to $5,000, for example, to get their one engineer certified on this particular brand of ventilator, right, that they use. But at the end of the day, that's a net benefit for them because now they have an engineer on call that can actually fix the ventilator, and the company at the end of the day didn't have to lose their trade secret because they trained one specific person.
Yep.
Now, there's always the possibility that one specific person can go tell a competitor what happened, right? But you can say that about any industry. I can go work for Apple today and go take those trade secrets and go to Microsoft. But at the end of the day, that doesn't make you that's just showcasing your morals at the end of the day. Personally, whatever information I learned from my company, I would not give it to another company just because that's just not the right thing to do. It should just be based off of your skill set and what you're required to do for the job. But that can be something that can come up.
Yep. No, it's definitely true. And I mean,
that's a good point.
You're totally right. I mean, a lot of trade secrets are kind of brought back and forth from different companies every day. And when companies find out about their trade secrets getting leaked, what do? They go ahead and file civil suits. I mean, I think these are cases that might be kind of covered in a lot of our legal system already.
I mean, yeah, that's a good point. I think another thing we should mention, right, is how, the backlash of some of these companies, right, as these right to repair movements have gained momentum in the last few years, right? Like the DMCA, right? So do you have any thoughts about the DMCA for?
Can you define the DMCA?
So the DMCA is the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, right? It's essentially a legislation to, we said earlier, these big corporations are able to essentially copyright on, patents or designs, stuff like that. And they use it as a focal point on why they shouldn't release, documentation or authorized parts to third parties or consumers.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So any thoughts on that?
So I really don't like the DMCA. I think that with a lot of the things that companies are kind of hiding behind that law and those acts, it really infringes upon right to repair. I mean, for example, I've seen loads of companies hiding their documentation and service booklets and other kind of components and kind of how they put stuff together and all of these different things that would be used when repairing different products and devices. And they hide these behind, sorry, that's copyright. You can't see that. That's copyright. We own that. You can't post that. I'm sorry, that's copyright. And I mean, I like copyright. I think that that's obviously necessary in our current, legal system. But if they're not going to let other people post these the documentation online, they should be required by law to post it themselves. And I mean, like I said, maybe it's going to be different per industry, but in certain industries, especially the medical industry, especially right now, everyone should have access to the documentation required. So that way, technicians can repair stuff without having to wait, long times and pay outrageous prices to get ventilators, like I said, for right now fixed. They can get it fixed in an hour instead of, a week. And I mean, this is literally life and death, especially right now during COVID. And it's very sad that companies won't just publish this documentation willingly.
Yeah, this is definitely something, I went back to saying earlier. I say it would depend on the industry, right? So it's like tech companies, I would be a little more lenient on, just because I know at the end of the day, or at least I feel at the end of the day, I don't know, but I feel at the end of the day, I'm getting a better service by foregoing my right to repair, right? But for other industries, such as, Four alluded to, that, for the medical industry, we should probably have the right to repair and those documentations be online and not covered by DMCA, just because, again, it can be the matter of life or death, right? It's not just a matter of, oh, let me protect my trade secret so I can make a better bottom line. No, this is a matter of someone's life literally on the line who can die at any moment in time, right? And time is the most important asset that they have at that point. right? So
Yep.
it needs to be, it can't be behind a law such as, it can't be used for an industry like that for DMCA, I would say.
I think it also applied to
But to be
agriculture.
fair, before you continue, but to be fair, I'm not fully aware of DMCA, so please, I have to read through that whole law section before I can make a valid comment too.
So, like I said, I think this can be applied to agriculture. The same thing that Tu said. Basically, the same reasoning can be made for the agriculture industry. These farmers,
Mm-hmm.
right? They provide such a service to our not to our country, but over our world, right? They basically provide the food that we rely on. Stuff that everyone needs, right? And by limiting, basically, you know, essential equipment that they need, right? And you got to know, these farmers they don't just make tons of money, right? So every dollar counts for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like blocking them out of essential equipment that they need, or basically pushing them to foreclosure because, a company would basically say you can't repair your equipment because you have to do it through only us, and it costs well beyond their pay grade. It's only hurting us in the end for the sake of monetary gain. These farmers, a lot of them know their equipment inside and out, right? They work with it daily. They
Mm-hmm.
they, they love it. This is like, probably like a family generation industry for them, right? So of course they're gonna know how their equipment works and how it does, and they can probably do easily if they have the right parts or even the right documentation to ensure they don't damage it, right? And like I said earlier, I think even for that agriculture industry, documentation should be easily accessible for these people. Similar to the medical thing. It's not as life and death critical, but at the end of the day, they still, if our food makers of our industry go down or anything anyway, which has been steadily going down in the last few years, then it could be disastrous news for us as a whole.
Yeah, starvation is deadly. So
Starvation is deadly. I've been told. I'm not sure about that, but
I wouldn't try it.
I still have to get the verdict on that, but I don't want to find out. And I think, like we said earlier, at the end of the day, you can't just put a blanket, case for the right to repair to everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
As we said this numerous times throughout the podcast. Medical, yeah, come on. Agriculture, yeah, come on. But electronics and gaming, that's a bit lenient. Debatable, right? I mean, I think the way Apple's doing it is pretty much, I say, the way to go right now, right? I think that's pretty much the ideal way to have an authorized reseller, right? Apple trains these guys. It's a two-way relationship trust. If the guys mistrust Apple, like you said earlier too, these guys, they learn from Apple, so they can easily take their secrets somewhere else. But that comes down to moral, right? Why would they do that? That just severs their relationship, and then it's going to hurt them more because no one's going to hire someone who does that, right? And at the end of the day, it's a trust with Apple because Apple can gain a lot of knowledge from this too. They can get to know, what's it called? A lot of our clients can't afford this level of repair. Maybe we can be more lean on it, or we're getting a lot of repair jobs for this particular problem.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we getting so much problem? Maybe you can look into that, or even later on, they have too much repair jobs, especially with the COVID right now. There's just no Apple stores to go to right now. Like their level of support is limited. So by opening the industry, opening the program up, but still having a close eye and surveillance everything, you provide the same quality that Apple is able to get while still keeping it competitive to people and offering opportunities to these small repair shops. So I think it's a win-win, and I think I really praise the way Apple for the last recent days for extending their program to Canada and stuff like that. And I hope over time they extend even more to other Europeans and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I honestly I think it's not a blanket answer at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree.
And we can go back and forth about the whole future proofing thing, which I said this numerous times to you guys over and over again. Apple's like the number one corporate of victim of like, oh, Apple's future proofing their devices. They're doing it to keep you buying the next iPhone and stuff like that. But it's not as easy as that. The answer is not as clear as that. Apple wasn't doing it because they want you to buy the next iPhone. They will love you by the next iPhone, but they're not slowing down your iPhone 6 just so you can buy the new iPhone 9 or X or whatever, right? They're doing it because, once again, it comes back to their main principle. They want to have a great user experience, right? And with each update, if you don't know this, each update has more data. So if your phone, which was 5 years old, and it keeps getting updated with more and more data, newsflash, it's going to get slower with more data. Your processor doesn't upgrade with the iOS update. It's still the same processing speed and probably slower over time since you used it and overheated it. So again, should Apple have been more clear on how they approached it? Yes, but I still don't think what they did was actually, as bad as people made it out to. I think, once again, they're just so keen on having a user experience, and that's something I find a value in. I know that at the end of the day, at least with every time I buy an Apple product, every single little thing, from the user experience, from the software to the hardware, is thought thoroughly, and that's why I will always prefer Apple products over to Android, at least for right now.
I feel that was a personal call out right there for mentioning my 5-year-old iPhone 6, but I will let that go.
I'm just saying, you can barely load Facebook if you wanted to with that phone. And if you can't even surf the website, then I'm just saying, you can't expect the next iOS update to, carry you for the next 7 years.
Yeah, but exactly. So I guess to that point of future-proofing and everything, again, this goes back to what I mentioned earlier in Moore's Law, right? Hardware is advancing very quickly every 2 years, right? So there's no, I guess you can say, I kind of expect my iPhone 6 to not work as well as it did when I first got it, just because technology is advancing. And I think that's the beautiful thing, right? It's very hard to future-proof. Very, very difficult to future-proof. You could have bought a gaming PC, set it up with 64 gigs of RAM, right? But in 10, 15 years, you're probably gonna have to swap that out for a higher level of RAM. As we've seen, you go from when they went to the moon on 128 kilobytes of RAM, right, to my iPhone right now using, I think, a gig or 2 gigs of RAM, whatever it may be.
4 gigs.
Right? 4 gigs, even then, right? Or even like laptops and computers coming with 64 gigs. I think top of the line computers I've seen go for a terabyte of RAM.
Yeah,
that's insane to me, right?
Yeah, at the end of the day, you got to remember that when Apple designs a new iOS, right? It's with mind that they're using this iOS with the latest iPhone. And to be fair, Apple doesn't even have to make it compatible with the old phones, right? They're doing that because they want to have a user experience for all their fan base. Pretty much, if you ever see a phone get cut off in the new iOS update, it's because it literally cannot handle it. Like they thought about the process thoroughly, and they're like, the iPhone 5 cannot handle the iOS 14. It literally would burn itself. It would crash and burn the user's hand if it tried to run this. And not even including Apple. Take any phone, let's say 5 years or 6 years old right now, and try to load a popular website. It would struggle. It's not even just apps or updates or OS updates that are tremendously growing over time because of technology is increasing, but websites are also dramatically increasing. They're accessing more and more data every year, and your 5-year-old phone is just not going to be able to load YouTube as fast as our current iPhone right now. And that's not because iPhone's trying to future-proof you out of existence. It's because it literally needs to have a better processor to run YouTube. If you want to attack Apple, you probably should also attack Google. You should attack every single website in existence for accessing so much more data. And at that point, you probably should just get a new phone.
Well, let's get back on topic a little bit more, right? So let's talk about legislation surrounding right to repair. So one of the big kind of breakthroughs that happened many years ago was Bill H.4362 out of Massachusetts, enacted in 2012. This was an act protecting motor vehicle owners and small businesses in repairing motor vehicles. So essentially what this bill did was it required motor vehicle companies to release the same exact repair documents and give the same resources to third-party repair centers and small businesses, as well as consumers, that they were providing to their dealership operated repair centers, right? So this
Yeah.
made it so that way anybody pretty much can provide the same, or at least has the resources to provide the same degree of quality of work that the dealer operated repair centers are doing, right? So now this was a really big breakthrough in Massachusetts for their right to repair. Nine, why don't you talk a little bit about some of the other stuff, the right to repair laws that were, I believe, introduced in 2014?
So a lot of people were, I think iFixit was one of the main pushers for this, but they were trying to introduce a bunch of the right to repair laws throughout 4 states. I think it was South Dakota, New York, Massachusetts, and Minnesota, I believe. Um, Essentially, they wanted to introduce these laws to invoke the act of repair, as we said tons of times in the podcast, and they wanted to it become a legislation bill for it to essentially become legislation to allow you consumers to have the ability to modify or repair the devices on their own,
Mm-hmm.
right? Unfortunately, if I believe some of the states got passed, but New York was unfortunately one of them that didn't. So right now, with the current stance right now, New York, you're not allowed to have the right to repair. And the way it's going is basically, iFix and those other repair companies are still trying to push it, and it felt like a trial run for them to, slowly introduce it to the world.
Mm-hmm.
Their current goal is to make this, nationwide. They want this to be a legislation that runs on a federal level, right? But at the moment, it's it's being pushed back, and I don't know right now. There hasn't been much updates since 2016. I know California was also trying to. It was a separate legislation action altogether, but California was also trying to vote it. I think back in 2018. Different legislation, different party, but basically the same principle: the right to repair. And I think it's still in trial. I'm not sure, but essentially, in the last few years, the movement for you to have the right to repair your devices and consumer electronics has been growing.
Yep, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Well, so we'll see how how it continues in the next 4 years. It might, who knows? Maybe tomorrow we'll hear that Supreme Court rules that the right to repair is now legal throughout all United States, or it just might not go anywhere. It's hard to say with these legal cases. I'm not an expert on it, and I pretty much have no political stance or political opinion on how these things should run or knowledge of it. But I will hope to hear more about this and see where it goes.
For all you listeners out there, we're the last thing when it comes to being a lawyer. Like, so we don't know anything about that. No, we're just 3 tech guys, right?
I get my law knowledge from Law and Order. That's pretty much my level of expertise. But I honestly, legislation. I'm really excited to see that the last few years has been gaining momentum. But who knows what the next few years would say. It's honestly, I think with the whole pandemic we've been recently, I think it's been shedding a new sort of point of view on it, right? Especially when we started medical field and stuff like that. So we might see, more people getting more emphasis on it. We might not. So it's hard to say.
Yeah. So guys, like with that being said, I think we're cutting close to time here. So let's wrap up.
Yeah.
So wrap up. So Ford, let's start with yours. What are your final thoughts on everything we've discussed today surrounding the right to repair?
So I personally, I really think right to repair should be a thing. I really think I should be able to fix my own electronics. I would like to have the documentation to fix the stuff that I need to fix. And I mean, I'm especially keen on it being a thing in the medical industry, and maybe there's some other gray areas in other industries, but overall, I think in general it would be a good thing, and I think there's proper ways to do it, and I hope that we see some more traction and some more legislation coming up soon.
All right, 9, what are your final thoughts?
The more I think about it, the more I realize how much legislation nightmare. It's not a blanket thing that everyone says it is, right? But I do hope it does get addressed more, especially in crucial industries like medical and agriculture. These are things that we shouldn't be dwelling on. And these are, I would say, like Forrest said earlier, this is stuff he has to a point. There should be some sort of level of openness to it, because we shouldn't be playing with lives, right? This is stuff that should be acted on now. In terms of electronics and gaming and stuff like that, like I said, I think there should be, but to a range, with exceptions, And I honestly, I would like to see more momentum. I would like to see more opinions on this, and I would like to see it still gain attraction. I would hope that a year from now we have more news and we have more introductions on this.
Yeah, no, I agree with what both of you said, right? I think we made a couple of interesting points here today regarding, separate industries, whether it can be a blanket, legislation across right to repair, or whether it has to be industry by industry.
Yeah.
We even talked about whether it can be a life or death situation depending on the industry.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of little nuances that I think we've all learned today that stand around the right to repair.
It's not as easy. It's not as easy to answer. Yep. And I have to watch more Law and Order to comment on the legislation. really get a close opinion on it. But, we'll see.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, this has been the 429 podcast. It was great talking with you guys today. I hope you all enjoyed listening. And we will see you again next week,
when we discuss the difference between online multiplayer versus local multiplayer. But guys, leave us a thought. Leave us your thoughts. Leave us your feedback. We're really keen on getting your feedback. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook as well at the 429 podcast. So follow us, leave us some feedback, and we'll see you guys next week.
Yep.
Take care, guys.
Later, guys. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.